Hey everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're diving into Alex's bold choice to follow his heart, standing by Tuna and little Henry, while facing expectations from Lan, Mei, and his mother, Ba Fuang. We'll unpack the dinner revelation, the clear commitments at home, and the decisive conversations that set their future in motion. If you enjoy heartfelt, character-driven storytelling, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episode. Golden lamplight settled over the dining table, but the mood stayed formal and tight. Porcelain plates lined up like props, the food untouched. Lan, May's mother, smiled as she outlined florists, venues, palettes, and seating charts. "Give it a few months," she said, bright and certain. "Everything will fall into place." May sat beside her, graceful and attentive, answering politely when needed, though her gaze drifted toward Alex. He held the table's edge like it might steady him, present in body yet far away in thought. A chair leg brushed tile as Alex stood. The small sound quieted the room more than a speech. "I'm sorry," he said, steady and clear. "I can't marry May." Lan's smile disappeared. May folded her napkin, unfolded it, then smoothed it flat, breathing through the shock. At the far end, Alex's mother, Ba Fuang, didn't raise her voice, but concern gathered in her face. No one replied. It felt like the script had vanished mid-scene, leaving only truth on stage. "My heart belongs to someone else," Alex continued. "Her name is Tuna. She puts others first, even when it costs her. And Henry, her son, already feels like my own." Lan stared, struggling to square this confession with months of assumptions. May lifted her chin, holding on to her poise. Ba Fuang set her palm on the tablecloth, steadying a picture frame that had tilted. The quiet stretched. Alex filled it with the one thing he still trusted: honesty. He spoke about nights he couldn't sleep, replaying the same compromise, asking when duty had started sounding like surrender. He remembered what Ba Fuang taught him: be decent, be brave, be true. "If you meet Tuna and Henry," he said, "you'll see why I need to protect them. I want to be honest with you and with myself. This isn't a phase. It's the life I choose." He didn't defend or accuse. He set his decision down like a heavy box, both hands open, no promises he couldn't keep. He took a breath and nodded, as though confirming the choice with himself, then walked away from the table. Behind him, Lan stared at the space he left. May closed her eyes to collect herself. Ba Fuang watched her son go, hurt and protective at once, the family's weight resting on a fragile balance. Later, at the park by the lake, Tuna sat with Henry while the city lights patterned the water. Henry reached up, fingers spread, fascinated by the shimmer across the surface. Alex arrived, and relief moved over his face the instant he saw them. "I told them," he said as he took a seat. "I said I won't marry May. I said I choose you." No speech could have meant more. Tuna laced her hand through his, answering without flourishes. She had never asked him for grand gestures. She had waited for a clear step forward. Alex crouched beside Henry and pointed toward the brightest glow reflected on the lake. "That one's ours," he said gently. "When things get complicated, look there. We'll find our way." Henry smiled up at him, too young to understand every word, old enough to recognize affection. Alex sat back, and Tuna leaned into him like someone who could finally stop bracing. He promised to shield them from fallout. "Ba Fuang is upset, Lan is disappointed, and May deserves respect," he said. but none of that reaches you or Henry. Tuna nodded. I don't need easy, she replied. I need real. They shared the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It felt like a room they had been building for months, one honest sentence at a time, finally furnished with a decision. Alex talked through the dinner, naming what was said and what wasn't. The quick loss in Lan's eyes, the careful strength in May's posture, the restrained pain in Ba Fuang's silence. Tuna listened, holding each piece like something valuable and fragile. When he finished, she nodded. He promised to speak with Ba Fuang again, not to plead, but to be kind and firm. I'll own my choice without making enemies, he said. Tuna nodded. I'll be home with Henry if you need a place to land, she answered. If you don't, I'll still be home, cheerin'. Alex laughed, a small, grateful sound. They lingered until the rhythm around them felt ordinary again, then walked, pushing Henry's wheelchair along the path. It wasn't a triumphal march, it was a quiet beginning, chosen on purpose. The next afternoon, the garden gate creaked open. Tuna paused at the clothesline with Henry's tiny shirt in her hands and turned to see May in a plain white blouse. No dramatic makeup, no formal dress, just measured composure and eyes holding too many thoughts at once. Tuna's first instinct was caution. She nodded hello and waited. May stepped in, set her bag on the bench, and spoke without pleasantries. I came to talk. Henry slept nearby, his breaths even. May looked directly at Tuna. How much do you love Alex? The question was blunt, but not cruel, plain and impossible to dodge. Tuna inhaled, aware that the wrong words could turn a conversation into a battlefield. May's eyes flicked to Henry, then back, less like rivalry and more like a test neither woman had asked to take. I don't have perfect words, Tuna said, keeping her voice level. But if pressure ever takes him from me, I will still be here. My love isn't about leaving. It's about walking with him, whatever it costs. May didn't move for a long beat. She set down an untouched glass of water, as if anchoring herself. She studied Henry, innocent and oblivious to the choices being weighed a few steps away. Then she turned to the gate and paused with her hand on it. Tonight, be ready, May said quietly. I'll find Alex. Tuna couldn't tell whether that was help, warning, or both. May added, still facing the yard, he is the first to live his own dream. I won't be the one to make him smaller. She left without dramatics, leaving a clarity that felt heavier than conflict. Tuna stood in the quiet and let the words settle. She looked at Henry, then at the bench where May had sat, and understood. This wasn't a feud to win, but a measure of resolve. She gathered the tiny shirt and clipped it to the line, hands steady. Whatever happened that evening, whatever words were traded, she would stand where she had promised to stand, beside Alex, beside Henry, with a commitment that didn't bluff or bargain. She would not waver, not tomorrow. She checked on Henry, brushed a fingertip over his cheek, and let herself breathe. The day moved on, ordinary and demanding. Resolve, she'd learned, isn't loud. It's the way you keep going, even when everything around you waits for you to flinch. Tuna remained in the yard after May left, choosing stillness over panic. Henry slept nearby, steady. The small shirts on the line reminded her what mattered. She replayed May's question, not to argue with it, but to answer it again with action. She chose to stay, to back Alex without bargaining, and to prepare for the evening with simple, practical order. No speeches, no dramatic vows, just a clear decision: stand, protect, continue. She wiped the bench and set aside anything that might distract her. Readiness, to her, meant care within reach and a mind that didn't rush. She checked Henry's bag, packed a spare shirt, and refilled his bottle. If the night brought tension, she would meet it with routine and steady tone. She would not chase rumors or measure herself against anyone. Her role was fixed by choice. Be the partner who holds the line and keeps the child safe. Inside, she eased Henry onto a mat, placed his favorite toy within reach, and wrote a short list for later. Nothing on the list was dramatic: milk, laundry, a loose hinge to tighten. But the list carried a point. Life would continue. Decisions lasted because people upheld them in details. She silenced her phone and left it on the table. Alex knew where she stood. He did not need reminders. Trust meant letting the last clear sentence speak for itself. Across town, Alex retraced the dinner in his mind and measured the fallout. He had refused the wedding and named Tuna and Henry as his family. That decision would not be retracted. He decided on the tone he would keep: firm, courteous, direct. With Ba Fuang, he would not demand approval. He would ask for understanding and time, while repeating the same message every time it was tested. With Lan and Mei, he would hold respect without returning to pretense. The line was simple: no secret arrangements. He also decided on pace. He would not sprint toward a new crisis, and he would not hide. If invited to talk, he would go. If not, he would stay with Tuna and Henry and build the daily proof that mattered: presence. He pictured Henry smiling at a small victory, and Tuna rolling her sleeves, the household settling around them like a rhythm they both trusted. He would let time do the work that arguments rarely accomplish. Tuna considered Mei's choice to visit alone and ask a hard question without theatrics. That choice signaled seriousness. Tuna decided to treat it as a bridge rather than a trap. If Mei wanted another conversation, Tuna would meet her with the same steady answer. She would not compete, recite grievances, or trade insults by proxy. She would name her commitment and return to care. If Mei pushed, Tuna would not break. If Mei listened, Tuna would not gloat. Mei, leaving the yard earlier, had made a decision of her own: face facts without spectacle. She had asked the essential question and heard an answer that did not wobble. She had told Tuna to be ready and promised to find Alex. That meant she chose directness over rumor. She too had a boundary forming: dignity over pursuit, clarity over delay. Whatever she chose next would be measured against those lines. For his part, Alex refused to turn Mei into a rival inside his story. He chose words that acknowledged her standing without offering false hope. If she asked for a meeting, he would accept and speak plainly. He would not relitigate the dinner or shift blame. He would present one road only: respect at a distance. If friendship was possible later, it would come from honest ground, not from negotiation disguised as comfort. He also set a rule about timing. Important talks would happen at reasonable hours and in neutral spaces. He would not allow sudden midnight scenes or open-ended debates that circled back to old points. This was not coldness. It was design. A clear schedule kept everyone sane and kept Henry's routine intact. He held that rule for himself before asking others to honor it. Back at home, Tuna reviewed everything she could control and released what she could not. She could keep the house ordered, the bag prepared, her tone consistent, and her promises current. She could not control someone else's timeline for acceptance. Her decision was to hold her ground with quiet regularity and to welcome any conversation that arrived in good faith. She would decline games, bait, and back-channel pressure. She would engage only where dignity stayed intact. She thought about Ba Fuang, not as an enemy, but as a mother caught between hope and respect for an adult child's choice. Tuna decided she would meet her with patience while refusing to fade. If invited, she would introduce herself again, answer questions about Henry, and explain how she and Alex shared responsibilities. She would do this once cleanly and more than once kindly. She would not beg membership in a family. She would offer partnership with her son. Alex set his keys on the counter and wrote a short note of his own, a list of groceries, a reminder to fix a cabinet, and a line at the bottom. Dinner together at 7. The line was not symbolic, it was coordination. He decided that, until further notice, the home schedule would be the center of gravity. If calls came, he would return them after the meal. If visits were requested, he would propose the next day. If pressure rose, he would shorten conversations rather than escalate them. He and Tuna, without consulting each other in that moment, arrived at the same posture: readiness without drama, clarity without cruelty. They would make room for anyone who approached with respect. They would close the door on tactics. They would default to the same sentences. They would avoid new promises until old ones were proven. Decisions like that did not make headlines, but they built a life. Before evening, Tuna checked on Henry one more time. She adjusted his blanket, set a bottle within reach, and turned to the table where her list waited. She added one more line: patience for myself. That too was a decision. She would not measure her worth by how quickly others accepted her. She would measure it by how faithfully she kept the course she chose. She folded the list and placed it beside the keys. Alex looked at his watch and breathed once, deep and even. Not a signal of anxiety, but of alignment. He had chosen his words, his pace, and his boundaries. Tuna had chosen her stance, her policies, and her care. May had chosen directness. Ba Fuang would choose in her own time. Henry, without knowing it, gave all of them a scale that kept priorities true. Evening would bring whatever it brought. Their decisions would meet it, one calm step at a time. Alex rejects an arranged future at a tense family dinner, calmly telling Lan and May that he won't marry May. He declares his love for Tuna and commitment to Henry, while his mother, Ba Fuang, struggles between disappointment and principle. Later, Alex and Tuna choose a path. No secrets, no theatrics, just daily presence and protection for Henry. May visits Tuna alone, asks how deeply she loves Alex, and hears a steady answer. Love means staying and walking through pressure. May leaves with dignity, promising to find Alex and face facts directly. Alex resolves to speak respectfully with everyone, keep boundaries, and invite Ba Fuang to meet Tuna and Henry in good faith. Tuna prepares the home, prioritizing routine and calm over drama. Together, they decide to build proof through simple actions, meeting any conversation with clarity, patience, and unwavering choice.